Welcome to the Strive, Seek, Find podcast with me, Tom Heaton. You enter the gym. You go to the weight rack and pick up the lightest weight there. You do a couple of reps, then put it back down. Satisfied with your progress, you have a little break. You then move over to the barbell area. There's already a heavily weighted barbell there, 3 times your body weight at least. You prepare yourself and apply your best effort at lifting off the ground with a good technique, but it doesn't budge. Satisfied with a solid day of training, you head home. There aren't many of us that would think of an exercise regime like this as one that would be likely to lead to success. But we sometimes think this way when it comes to our cognitive training, that is, our learning. Using muscle as an analogy is not perfect, but it can be helpful. In particular, I think it can help us guide our approach to learning difficulty very effectively. That is, we know either extreme of weight is not that effective for physical growth, and this is really obvious to us. But the same is true when we are exercising our brains for learning. You want a desirable level of difficulty. We want to stimulate growth, but for the learning to still be possible. Now, it is usually the first example I described where we actually find ourselves. That is, we make it too easy. Cognitive effort often feels a little unpleasant. The issue is that we then interpret this as a problem. We think that the task is not right. Why should we be struggling, we ask ourselves. This leads us to instead do tasks that we find comfortable, assuming somehow that this is a signal of better fit. But this is the equivalent of picking up a super light weight at the gym. It simply causes very little cortical engagement. You're really just using your working memory to hold the problem and nothing more. We're not engaging the deep neural networks, and we are not modifying them to incorporate new knowledge or skills within them. As such, there is no real learning actually happening. With the weights analogy, we are simply not stimulating any growth because the task is too easy. I think the opposite end of the spectrum is a little more obvious, but it is worth exploring too. If we try and lift weight that is too heavy, we find we quite simply can't. And similarly, we don't really achieve and benefit from this. The same is true with learning. If a task is too difficult, we're unable to make any modification to our mental models. This is because we either can't understand the new information at all, or fail to appreciate this relevance to us. Regardless, learning does not occur. This is often more obvious to us because we feel stumped, and we can recognise the lack of progress better. But this is not always the case. Sometimes we feel just because we are striving and putting effort, some benefit must be occurring. But this is not true. Instead, we are looking for the middle ground. We're wanting to apply the Goldilocks principle, or, as I've discussed here, Robert Bjork's idea of desirable difficulty. It needs to be hard enough to stimulate development and to stimulate learning to occur. But it must be possible. Like with lifting weight, we need to feel some strain on our muscles, because it is this which is stimulating growth. We need to expect to feel some cognitive difficulty when we are learning. When it comes to implementation, there are 2 key factors that I think you should be alert for. The first is a feeling of cognitive demand. If we are not feeling any cognitive strain, then the work is likely not hard enough. When it comes to specific implementation, there are some simple methods we can use to help with this. The most effective is the testing effect. That is, instead of simply reading or listening to information about the topic, we try and actively retrieve the information we already know. We test ourselves. This unavoidably leads to active engagement with the topic, rather than the passive engagement, which is possible if we are simply reading, listening, or watching. Cognitive demand is inevitable, unless we know the information really, really well. I think this is partly why the testing effect has got such robust evidence for a positive impact on learning. But, as the initial analogy notes, we still need to make sure that the testing is possible. The second relevant point that this raises is the spectre of failure. By making our learning and growth somewhat difficult, we have to be pushing our boundaries. Failure is therefore essentially inevitable for effective learners. Failure is not the mechanism by which the learning happens, but a marker. It is how we interpret this marker that is important. The problem is that we often translate it as being relevant to us as individuals, not to the problem itself. We think we have failed, as if this somehow reflects on us negatively. We need to be able to flip this reflex, to react to failure positively. Good, I am pushing myself. Now I need to look at what I need to change in order to succeed. This is the power and the challenge of desirable difficulty. It stimulates our growth, but is often uncomfortable. As with the buzz of exercise, we need to learn to enjoy that discomfort, to thrive with it, and then we can truly grow. Thank you for listening. To keep up to date and to follow my writings, subscribe to me on Substack, which is striveseekfind.substack.com, or follow me on X at @2striveseekfind.